I couldn't breathe when I saw her face. My ex-wife, Sarah, lying there in a fancy kit with flowers all around, dead. But something wasn't right. Her cheeks had a touch of pink that dead people don't have. And just as I leaned in closer, I saw it, the tiniest movement of her chest rising and falling.
She's not dead, I whispered, my cleaning cloth dropping to the floor. Hey friend, I know you're probably sitting there, maybe drinking your coffee or scrolling through YouTube on your couch. The weather might be cold where you are, or maybe it's a sunny day. But I promise you this story is about to get wild. If you hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now, you'll be the first to hear what happens when a simple cleaner takes on a billionaire who's willing to bury his wife alive for money. Trust me, you don't want to miss how I turned this funeral into a nightmare they'll never forget. My name's Frank Miller. I've been cleaning at Evergreen Funeral Home for 15 years. Not the kind of job most people notice, but I notice everything. Every speck of dust, every tearful family member, and apparently, every not quite dead person about to be buried. I was just doing my usual rounds that Tuesday morning. The funeral home was quiet, getting ready for the big service later. The Blackwood funeral. That's what they called it. Like Sarah wasn't even a person with her own name anymore. Just the billionaire's wife. Frank, what are you doing in here? The family will arrive in an hour. Mr. Jenkins, my boss, came hurrying in with his usual worried look. His bow tie was crooked like always. I couldn't move away from the casket. Sir, I know this woman. You know Sarah Blackwood? His eyebrows shot up like I'd said I knew the president. She was Sarah Miller once. My wife. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. We've been divorced for 8 years. 8 years since she left me for Richard Blackwood with his mansion on the hill and his fancy cars. Mr. Jenkins' face changed. He looked at me with pity now. I'm sorry, Frank. I had no idea. Look, why don't you take the day off? But I couldn't move. Something was pulling me back to Sarah's face. Sir, I don't think she's dead. He laughed nervously. Frank, come on. The medical examiner signed off on everything. Mr. Blackwood is one of the most respected men in town. I placed my fingers on her wrist, feeling for a pulse. My heart nearly stopped when I felt it. Faint, but definitely there. A tiny flutter. Call 911. I said, my voice stronger now. She's alive. Mr. Jenkins shook his head. This is impossible. You're upset, Frank. You're seeing things because... Look, I pulled out my phone's flashlight and shined it in Sarah's eyes. The pupils contracted. Dead people's eyes don't do that. Mr. Jenkins stumbled backward, his face going white. Oh my God. The next few minutes were chaos. Jenkins calling 911. Me checking Sarah's breathing, trying to figure out what happened. And then the sound of expensive shoes clicking on marble. Richard Blackwood stood in the doorway, tall and perfect in his black suit. His face was a mask of grief that cracked into confusion when he saw me hunched over his wife's body. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Who is this man touching my wife? Mr. Blackwood, Jenkins stammered. This is Frank, one of our staff. He believes your wife might still be. She's alive, I said, looking Richard straight in the eyes. She's been drugged or something, but she's alive. For just a split second, I saw it. Not shock or relief or confusion. Pure rage flashed across Richard's face before he covered it with concern. What? That's impossible. He rushed to the casket, pushing me aside. Sarah? Sarah, can you hear me? He grabbed her hand, but I noticed he didn't check for a pulse. The paramedics arrived minutes later. They confirmed what I already knew. Sarah was alive, barely. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, I caught a glimpse of something on her neck. A tiny needle mark, almost hidden by her hair. Sir, your wife appears to have been under the influence of a powerful sedative, one paramedic told Richard. If this gentleman hadn't noticed, she would have been buried alive. I finished, staring hard at Richard. Richard's face was perfect again, the worried husband. Thank God you found her. I don't understand how this happened. The doctors said it was heart failure, but when our eyes met, I saw something cold there. Something that said he knew exactly what had happened, and he wasn't happy I had ruined it. As they wheeled Sarah out, Richard grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. I don't know what you think you saw, Mr. Miller. Frank Miller, Sarah's first husband. His eyes narrowed. Well, Mr. Miller, I'm grateful you saved my wife. But don't think this makes you a part of her life again. He leaned in closer. And if you go around making accusations about what happened here, remember, No one will believe a cleaner over me. He walked out behind the stretcher, already on his phone, already taking control of the situation. But he didn't know one thing about me. I might be just a cleaner now, but I used to be a military medic. I knew exactly what kind of drugs could mimic death. And I was going to prove Richard Blackwood had tried to murder my ex-wife. I just needed to get to the hospital before he could finish what he started. I ran to my old pickup truck, hands shaking so bad I could barely get the key in. Richard Blackwood had just tried to bury his wife alive. My ex-wife. And nobody but me seemed to notice anything wrong with him. The fancy paramedics treated him like he was the victim. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel. I wasn't about to let him finish the job at the hospital. The hospital was on the other side of town, Memorial General, where the rich people went. I'd been there once, years ago, when Sarah broke her arm. Back when we were still happy. Back before Richard Blackwood showed up at that charity event, where Sarah was volunteering and I was cleaning up after the guests. My phone rang as I hit the highway. It was Mr. Jenkins from the funeral home. "Frank, where are you going? You can't just leave in the middle of your shift." "I just saved a woman from being buried alive," I said, my voice shaking. "I think I've earned a break." "Look, Frank, I know you're upset. Finding your ex-wife like that must have been a shock. But Mr. Blackwood is very concerned about your behavior." I nearly drove off the road. My behavior? The man was burying his wife alive. He says you made wild accusations in front of the paramedics. "Frank, Richard Blackwood is the biggest donor to this town's hospital, the police charity ball, and half the businesses downtown. You need to be very careful what you say." That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. Richard owned this town. If he wanted to make me disappear, who would stop him? But that didn't change what I knew. "I'm going to the hospital," I said, and hung up. The Memorial General parking lot was packed, but I didn't have time to find a good spot. I left my truck in the emergency loading zone and ran inside. The woman at the front desk looked up at me with tired eyes. "I need to see Sarah Blackwood," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "She was just brought in by ambulance." "Are you family?" she asked, typing on her computer. "I'm her ex-husband." She gave me a look. "I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. Blackwood is in a restricted area. Only current family members are allowed." "Listen to me." I leaned in close. "Her current husband just tried to kill her. She's not safe with him." The receptionist's eyes went wide, and she reached for her phone. "Sir, I need you to step back or I'll call security." That's when I heard his voice behind me. Smooth as butter, cold as ice. "There's no need for that. I'll handle this." Richard Blackwood stood there in his perfect suit, not a hair out of place. How had he beaten me here? He must have taken his helicopter. I'd seen it land on the hospital roof once before when some reporter did a story about his generous donations to the hospital. "Mr. Miller was just leaving," Richard said to the receptionist, his hand closing around my arm like a vice. "Weren't you, Frank?" He pulled me to the side, his smile never faltering. Anyone watching would think we were old friends having a chat. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "Sarah had a bad reaction to her heart medication. The doctors misdiagnosed her condition. It happens sometimes. A tragic mistake that, thankfully, you helped correct. That's the story. The only story. And if I tell people what really happened?" I challenged. His smile got colder. "Then you'll be a disturbed ex-husband making wild accusations against a grieving man who almost lost his wife. Who do you think people will believe? The town janitor or the man who employs half of them?" "Friend, I know you're probably sitting there thinking I should have punched him right in his perfect teeth. But sometimes you have to be smart, not just angry. If you want to see how I outplayed a billionaire at his own game, hit that like button and make sure you've subscribed. Because what happened next changed everything." "I want to see her," I demanded. "That's not going to happen," Richard said. "Sarah's getting the care she needs, and when she wakes up, I'll make sure she knows you helped today. Maybe she'll send you a thank you note." He laughed, like the idea of Sarah talking to me was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. I was about to argue when a doctor in a white coat approached us. "Mr. Blackwood, your wife is stable now. We've run some preliminary tests." Richard's hand tightened on my arm in warning before he turned to the doctor with a concerned expression. "Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Any idea what happened?" Dr. Phillips glanced at me suspiciously. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private." "It's fine," Richard said smoothly. "Frank here is the one who discovered the mistake. He deserves to know Sarah's okay." The doctor nodded reluctantly. Mrs. Blackwood had a dangerous level of benzodiazepines in her system, along with a compound that slowed her heart rate to nearly undetectable levels. It's consistent with an accidental medication interaction, but quite unusual. Will there be a toxicology report? I asked. Dr. Phillips looked surprised that the maintenance guy knew such a term. We've already drawn blood, yes. I'd like a copy of that report, I said. Richard laughed. Frank is concerned, of course. But doctor-patient confidentiality would prevent that, wouldn't it, doctor? Absolutely, Dr. Phillips said quickly. Only next of kin can access those records. I felt trapped. They were closing ranks around Sarah, and I couldn't get to her. But I had one card left to play. I understand, I said, surprising both of them. I'm just glad Sarah's okay. When she wakes up, could you just tell her Frank was here? Tell her I still have a butterfly box. She'll know what that means. The doctor looked confused, but nodded. I can pass along a message, yes. Richard's face darkened. That won't be necessary. It's just a harmless message, I said, backing away. I won't bother you anymore. As I walked toward the exit, I could feel Richard's eyes burning into my back. He thought he'd won. He thought I was giving up. But the butterfly box wasn't just a keepsake from our marriage. It was where Sarah kept all her important documents, including the ones that would reveal why Richard Blackwood might want his wife dead. I just needed to get to our old storage unit before Richard figured out what I was doing. And I needed to be very, very careful, because now I was sure of one thing. Richard Blackwood had tried to kill Sarah once, and he wouldn't hesitate to do the same to me. Just as I pushed through the hospital doors, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I know what Richard did. Meet me in the hospital parking garage, level 3. Come alone if you want to help Sarah. Someone else knew the truth. But was it a trap? Or the ally I desperately needed? The hospital parking garage was dim and smelled like exhaust. Each step I took echoed between the concrete walls. Level 3 was nearly empty, except for a few cars scattered in the corners. My heart was pounding, so hard I was sure anyone nearby could hear it. Hello. I called out, my voice bouncing back at me. I got your message. Nothing. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. I was starting to think I'd been played when a car door opened nearby. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, dressed in scrubs with her dark hair, pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked nervous, checking over her shoulder before approaching me. Mr. Miller? I'm Denise Williams. I'm Sarah's nurse. She held out her hand, then quickly pulled it back. We don't have much time. Mr. Blackwood has arranged to have Sarah transferred to a private facility this evening. Why are you helping me? I asked, still not sure if I could trust her. Denise's eyes darted around the garage again. Because this isn't the first time. 3 months ago, another wealthy patient came in with similar symptoms. The wife said he'd had a heart attack, but the toxicology showed the same drug combination. Before we could investigate, the husband died anyway. The wife inherited everything. My blood went cold, and the wife was a close friend of Richard Blackwood. They serve on the same charity boards. Denise pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I made a copy of Sarah's preliminary blood work. The drugs in her system, they're not from any medication interaction. This was deliberate. I took the paper with shaking hands. This was proof. Why bring this to me? Why not the police? Denise laughed bitterly. Richard Blackwood donated the new wing to the police station last year. His brother-in-law is the chief. And even if they believed me, I'd lose my job for violating privacy laws. She looked at me with desperate eyes. But you're her ex-husband. You obviously still care about her. And you have nothing to lose. Friend, there are moments in life when you have to decide who you are. Are you the person who walks away from trouble, or the one who runs straight toward it? If you're still with me, tap that subscribe button, because you're about to see what happens when a simple man like me decides to take on one of the most powerful men in town. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I need to get into Sarah's room. Denise shook her head. Impossible. Richard has a private security guard outside her door. Of course he does, I muttered. The man thought of everything. When will she wake up? That's the thing, Denise said, lowering her voice even though no one was around. She should be awake by now. The drugs are clearing from her system, but she's still unconscious. And Dr. Phillips, the one treating her, he's Richard's personal physician. The pieces clicked together in my head. They're keeping her sedated until they can move her somewhere private. Denise nodded. The transfer papers say it's for specialized treatment, but once she's out of this hospital, there's no one to monitor what medication she receives. My mind raced. If Richard got Sarah to his private facility, she'd never come out alive. And this time, he'd make sure there were no mistakes. What time is the transfer? I asked. 8 tonight. Less than 4 hours from now. I needed a plan. First, I needed proof Richard was behind this. Second, I needed to stop that transfer. And third, I needed to keep myself alive long enough to do the first two things. Denise, I need you to do something for me. When you go back, tell Sarah something. Even if she seems unconscious, she might hear you. Tell her Frank is going to the butterfly box. Can you do that? She nodded. What's the butterfly? Better you don't know, I said. Plausible deniability. But there's one more thing. Does the hospital have a back entrance? One that's not watched by security cameras. The service entrance near the kitchen. Delivery trucks use it. She looked at me suspiciously. What are you planning? I'm going to get evidence that Richard tried to kill Sarah. Then I'm coming back here before 8 to make sure she doesn't leave with him. I didn't add that I had no idea how I'd actually accomplish either of those things. Denise handed me a hospital ID badge. It's an old one from before they added photos. It won't get you past security, but it might help you blend in if you're wearing the right clothes. I took the badge, surprised by her help. Why risk your job for this? You don't even know me. Her face hardened. My sister was married to a man like Richard Blackwood. Charming, powerful, controlling. She died in an accident, too. Nobody asked any questions. She turned to go, then looked back at me. Be careful, Mr. Miller. Men like Richard don't lose gracefully. After Denise left, I sat in my truck, thinking hard. The storage unit with our old belongings was across town. The butterfly box was a small wooden chest Sarah's grandmother had given her. Inside was a false bottom where Sarah kept important documents, including, if I remembered correctly, her original will. The drive to West Side Storage took 20 minutes. My unit was in the back corner, number 327. I kept paying for it even after the divorce, partly because I couldn't face sorting through our old life, and partly because Sarah sometimes still stored things there. She kept her key. The metal door screeched as I rolled it up. Inside were stacks of boxes, old furniture, and memories I tried to forget. Our wedding photo. The coffee table we bought on our first anniversary. Sarah's grandmother's rocking chair. The butterfly box should have been on the shelf in the back. But when I got there, my heart sank. The shelf was empty except for a thin layer of dust. Someone had taken it. Richard. He must have known about the box. Sarah probably told him, never suspecting he'd use that information against her. I kicked an old box in frustration, sending it tumbling. Papers scattered across the concrete floor, old bills, Christmas cards, and a manila envelope I didn't recognize. I picked it up. Written on the front in Sarah's handwriting, Frank, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a letter dated just 3 months ago, and a USB drive. Frank, the letter began, I know we haven't spoken in years, and that's my fault. But you're the only person I can trust with this. Richard isn't the man I thought I married. He's involved in something dangerous. If anything happens to me, everything you need is on this drive. Don't go to the police. Richard owns them. Go to Rebecca Chun at the district attorney's office. She's the only one who can't be bought. I'm sorry for everything. Sarah. I stared at the small drive in my palm. What had Sarah discovered? And how had she known she might need an insurance policy? Just then, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Frank Miller. A man's voice I didn't recognize. This is Detective James Harding, County Sheriff's Department. I need to ask you some questions about your whereabouts today. My mouth went dry. What's this about? There's been a break-in at Evergreen Funeral Home. Mr. Richard Blackwood's wife's personal effects were stolen. Your boss says you left suddenly today, right after an altercation with Mr. Blackwood. Richard was setting me up, making me look like a jealous ex who'd stolen from his former wife's funeral. I need you to come down to the station right away, sir. Of course, I said, trying to sound cooperative. I'll head there now. I hung up and quickly pocketed the USB drive. I needed to see what was on it, but not here. Not now. Richard's reach was longer than I thought, and time was running out for Sarah. As I locked the storage unit, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up, blocking my truck. 2 large men in suits stepped out. Mr. Miller? Mr. Blackwood would like a word with you. They weren't asking, and from the bulges under their jackets, I guess they weren't the kind of men who took no for an answer. What about? I asked, glancing around for an escape route. There was none. The larger man smiled without humor. About Sarah's butterfly box, and why you're so interested in it. They knew. Somehow, they knew I'd been here, which meant they probably also knew about the envelope Sarah had left. My only hope was that they didn't know I'd already found it. Get in the car, Mr. Miller. Mr. Blackwood is a busy man. I thought about running, but where would I go? If I wanted to help Sarah, I needed to face Richard. I needed to understand what was on that USB drive that was worth killing for. So I got in the car, the USB drive heavy in my pocket like a ticking bomb. I was about to meet the man who tried to bury his wife alive, and I had a feeling he wasn't going to let me walk away twice. The SUV didn't take me to Richard's mansion on the hill like I expected. Instead, we drove to Blackwood Tower downtown, 50 stories of glass and steel that cast a shadow over the whole city. Richard's name was right there on the building in giant letters, just in case anyone forgot who owned this town. The two men, who never bothered introducing themselves, led me through a private entrance and into an elevator that required a special key. We rode up in silence, my stomach dropping as we passed floor after floor. Finally, the doors opened directly into a massive office with windows that showed the entire city spread out below. Richard Blackwood stood with his back to me, looking out his kingdom. He didn't turn around when I entered. Do you know what the difference is between men like me and men like you, Frank? He asked, still staring out the window. About $10 billion and a conscience. I shot back. That got him to turn around. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Humor. That's good. You'll need that. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. Please sit. Would you like a drink? I'll stand, thanks. One of the men who'd brought me shoved me roughly into the chair anyway. Richard sighed, like he was disappointed in a child's behavior. Frank, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I want to thank you for what you did today. You saved Sarah's life. After you tried to end it, I said. Richard poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. That's a serious accusation from a man in your position. A man with a history of alcohol problems, who lost his job as a paramedic 5 years ago. A man who still obsesses over his ex-wife. He knew everything about me. Of course he did. Is that why you brought me here? To threaten me? Friend, if you've ever faced someone with all the money and power in the world, you know how small they can make you feel. But sometimes, having nothing to lose gives you a different kind of power. Stick with me and hit subscribe, because you're about to see how a man with nothing outsmarts a man who has everything. Richard sat on the edge of his desk, uncomfortably close to me. I brought you here to offer you a deal. A generous one. He pulled out a checkbook. $1 million. Tax-free. Enough for you to start a new life far from here. All you have to do is hand over whatever Sarah gave you, forget what you think you saw today, and disappear. My heart pounded. He didn't know exactly what Sarah had left, just that she'd left something. I had a tiny advantage. What makes you think Sarah gave me anything? I asked. Richard's smile tightened. Because I know my wife. She was cautious. Always had a backup plan. He leaned closer. Did you know she came to see you 3 months ago? My security team tracks her movements. She visited your storage unit, but came home empty-handed. I wondered what that was about. 3 months ago, right when she wrote that letter. What had happened that made her afraid enough to prepare an escape plan? Sarah and I haven't spoken in years, I lied. Maybe she was just picking up some old belongings. Maybe, Richard said, not believing me for a second. But then, why did she transfer $5 million to an offshore account the next day? Money I can't access. His calm facade cracked a little. And why did she change her will? Now we were getting somewhere. Sarah had money Richard couldn't touch, and she'd change her will. That explained why he'd want her dead. But there had to be more to it. I don't know anything about Sarah's money, I said truthfully. We've been divorced for 8 years. Richard studied my face. You know, I almost believe you. But then, why were you at the storage unit today? And why did you mention a butterfly box at the hospital? He had me there. I needed to give him something to buy myself time. It was just a keepsake from when we were married. A jewelry box her grandmother gave her. I thought she might want it. That's all. A jewelry box with a false bottom, Richard said, watching my reaction, where she kept important papers. So he didn't know about the box. But he didn't know what had been in it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be fishing for information. I don't know anything about a false bottom. I lied again. It was just a sentimental thing. Richard stood up, his patience visibly wearing thin. Frank, let me be clear. Sarah had information that belongs to me. Business information. I need it back. The offer of $1 million is generous, but it's not open-ended. He nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward menacingly. I don't have anything of yours, I insisted. Richard sighed. Search him. The men patted me down roughly, emptying my pockets onto Richard's desk. My wallet, my phone, my keys, but not the USB drive, which I'd slipped into my sock when we were in the elevator. Richard looked disappointed at the meager collection. Where is it, Frank? The butterfly box wasn't in the storage unit. We already checked. So they had been there. That's how they knew to look for me. I told you, I don't have anything. I was just at the unit to get some of my own stuff. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. It seems my wife is awake and asking for you. His eyes narrowed. What did you tell the hospital staff? Nothing, I said, surprised. Sarah was awake. That changed everything. I just asked them to tell her I was there. Richard put his phone away, thinking, here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me to the hospital. You're going to tell Sarah you were confused earlier, that you made a mistake. Then you're going to leave town. Tonight. He smiled coldly. Or my men will find that DUI you managed to avoid 5 years ago suddenly appears on your record, along with some other charges that might interest the police. I realized Richard was scared. Sarah was awake, which meant his plan was falling apart. He needed me to help him contain the situation. And if I do all that, you'll let me walk away? I asked, not believing him for a second. With a generous severance package, Richard confirmed. My driver will take you to the hospital now. I'll join you there shortly. As the men led me back to the elevator, I thought about the USB drive hidden in my sock. Whatever Sarah had discovered, it was big enough that Richard was willing to kill for it. And now I was being delivered right back to the hospital, exactly where I needed to be. The SUV drove through evening traffic toward Memorial General. One of Richard's men sat next to me in the back, watching my every move. The other one drove, occasionally making eye contact with me in the rearview mirror. So what's on it? The driver finally asked. On what? Whatever Blackwood's wife gave you. Must be something big for the boss to be so worked up. I stayed silent. They were fishing, which meant they still didn't know exactly what Sarah had left for me. As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, my guard's phone rang. He listened for a moment, then swore under his breath. Change of plans, he told the driver. The boss wants us to take him to the airfield instead. The airfield? That didn't sound good. They were taking me somewhere remote. Somewhere people wouldn't hear me scream. The driver made a sharp U-turn, heading away from the hospital. Away from Sarah. Away from any chance of help. What's at the airfield? I asked, try to keep the fear out of my voice. Neither man answered, but the driver's hand moved inside his jacket, and I caught a glimpse of a holster. These weren't just security guards. They were something much more dangerous. I had to get away now, or I'd never get another chance. As we stopped at a red light, I made my move. I need to throw up, I gasped, doubling over. Please, I'm going to be sick. The guard next to me hesitated, clearly disgusted. The last thing he wanted was vomit in the boss's luxury car. Pull over, he ordered the driver. The SUV swerved to the curb. The guard opened his door and roughly shoved me out. Make it quick, he warned. I stumbled to my knees on the sidewalk, pretending to retch. When the guard stepped closer, annoyed, I lunged upward with all my strength, driving my shoulder into his stomach. He went down hard, and I took off running into the crowded shopping district nearby. Behind me, I heard shouting and the sound of pursuit. But I knew these streets. I'd cleaned the buildings here for years while Richard Blackwood looked down from his tower. I ducked into an alley, then through the kitchen of a restaurant where the dishwasher owed me a favor, and out the delivery entrance on the other side. By the time I emerged, there was no sign of Richard's men, but I knew they wouldn't stop looking. And now I had an even bigger problem. Richard knew Sarah was asking for me, which meant he'd make sure she was moved somewhere I couldn't find her. I needed to see what was on that USB drive, and I needed help. There was only one person I could think of who might believe me. Denise, the nurse who'd given me Sarah's blood work. I found a pay phone and dialed the hospital, asking for her by name. This is Denise, she answered cautiously. It's Frank Miller. I need your help. Richard's men are after me, and I think they're planning to move Sarah. They already tried, she whispered. Dr. Phillips came with transfer papers, but I called him the hospital administrator. I told him I was concerned about moving a patient who had just regained consciousness. It bought us some time, but not much. Richard Blackwood is on his way here now. My mind raced. Is there a computer I can use? Somewhere private. My car is a laptop, she said after a moment's hesitation. I'm parked in the staff lot, Section C, blue Honda Civic. The keys are at the nurse's station in my purse. I can create a distraction so you can get them. It was a risk, but I didn't have any better options. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And Denise? Thank you. I made my way cautiously back toward the hospital, staying in shadows and watching for Richard's men. The staff entrance Denise had mentioned earlier was propped open with a brick. She'd come through for me again. Inside, I found a set of scrubs in a supply closet and put them on, then added a surgical mask for good measure. With the badge Denise had given me earlier, I looked like just another hospital worker. I made it to the nurse's station just as an alarm started blaring from one of the rooms down the hall. Nurses and doctors rushed toward the commotion, Denise's distraction. Her purse was right where she said it would be, partially hidden under the desk. I grabbed the keys and walked calmly toward the exit. In the parking lot, I found her blue Honda and quickly got inside. The laptop was on the back seat. I plugged in the USB drive with shaking hands. The screen filled with files, hundreds of them. Financial records, offshore account numbers, emails, and photographs. I clicked on one and felt sick. It showed Richard shaking hand with a man I recognized from the news, Viktor Kozlov, a Russian businessman who'd been investigated for human trafficking. I opened another file, a spreadsheet with names and amounts. Huge amounts. Next to each name was a note: Panama, Cayman, Switzerland, money laundering. And then I found a video file. When I played it, I saw Richard in his office, the same one I'd just been in. He was with two other men, discussing what sounded like shipping routes. Then Richard said it clearly. Once the girls are in the country, we have 12 hours to move them before the next shipment arrives. Sarah had discovered her husband was trafficking women, and she'd gathered enough evidence to put him away forever. My phone rang, startling me. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Frank. It's Sarah. Her voice was weak, but it was definitely her. Are you okay? Richard's men are looking for you. Sarah. I whispered, hardly able to believe it was her. How did you get this number? Denise gave it to me. Listen carefully. Richard knows I'm awake. He's on his way here now to finish what he started. I found a USB drive. I told her. I know what he's involved in. We need to get this to the authorities. Not the police, Sarah said urgently. Richard owns them. You need to take it to Rebecca Chun at the district attorney's office. She's been building a case against Richard's network for years. I'll go there now. I promised. No. Sarah's voice became more urgent. It's too late for that. Richard's too close. You need to bring it here, to the hospital. Rebecca is already on her way. Room 412. Hurry, Frank. The call ended. I sat frozen, not sure what to do. Something felt wrong. How did Sarah know about the USB drive specifically? I'd only mentioned it to Richard. And why would the district attorney come to a hospital room instead of having Sarah brought to her office? It had to be a trap. Richard must have forced Sarah to make that call. Or maybe it wasn't even her at all. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Denise. Don't come to the hospital. Sarah's still sedated. Not awake yet. Richard here with police. My blood ran cold. The call hadn't been from Sarah at all. Richard was trying to lure me back to the hospital where his men, or corrupt cops, would be waiting. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, my mind racing. I needed to get the USB drive to this Rebecca Chun person, but I had no idea how to find her. And I couldn't leave Sarah at the hospital with Richard, who would surely try again to silence her permanently. As I turned onto the main road, I noticed a black SUV pull out behind me. Then another one appeared ahead, blocking my path. Richard's men had found me, and this time, they weren't going to let me escape. I was trapped. Richard's black SUVs had me boxed in on a quiet street near the hospital. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. There was nowhere to go, no way out. The men from the front SUV stepped out, hands inside their jackets. They weren't trying to hide what this was anymore. In the rearview mirror, I could see more men coming from behind, 4 against 1, and they had guns. This was it. I was going to die on this street, and Richard Blackwood would get away with everything. The trafficking, the money laundering, and trying to murder Sarah. I thought about all the women whose names were in those files. All the lives destroyed while Richard lived in his glass tower above it all. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. Not today. I revved Denise's Honda and jerked the wheel hard, aiming for the narrow gap between the SUV and a parked car. Metal scraped against metal as I forced my way through, the Honda's side mirror snapping off. Gunshots rang out behind me, and the back window shattered. I ducked low, pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The Honda jumped forward, engine screaming as I swerved through traffic. Behind me, the SUVs were in pursuit, their powerful engines quickly gaining ground. I couldn't outrun them in this little car. I needed to outsmart them. I took a hard right down a narrow alley where the bigger vehicles would struggle to follow. Trash cans toppled as I clipped them, sparks flying as the car scraped against the brick walls. At the end of the alley, I cut across a busy street, causing horns to blare and brakes to screech. For a moment, I thought I'd lost them. But then a black SUV appeared in my rearview mirror again. These guys were professionals. They weren't going to give up easily. I needed help, and I needed it fast. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Sarah had said to take it to Rebecca Chun at the district attorney's office. It was my only shot. Hey friend, I know your heart is probably racing as fast as mine was in that moment. If you want to know how I escaped Richard's killers and what happened when I finally got the evidence to the DA, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I found out next changed everything about the case and about Sarah. I grabbed Denise's phone from the car's cup holder and tried to search for the DA's office while driving, swerving through streets I'd known all my life. The downtown courthouse was about 10 minutes away, but I'd never make it there with Richard's men on my tail. After a few frantic searches, I found what I needed, Rebecca Chin's direct office number. With one hand on the wheel and my eyes flicking between the road and the phone, I dialed. District Attorney Chun, a crisp, professional voice answered. My name is Frank Miller, I said, breathing hard. Sarah Blackwood left evidence for me about her husband's criminal activities. Human trafficking, money laundering. I have it all on a USB drive. But Richard's men are trying to kill me, and Sarah's in danger at Memorial General. There was a pause. Where are you right now, Mr. Miller? Driving east on Maple Street, trying to lose men with guns in black SUVs. Another shot rang out, shattering my side mirror. They're shooting at me. Listen carefully, Chun said, her voice suddenly urgent. There's a police substation 3 blocks from you on Elm Street. Pull in there and ask for Detective Marcus. Tell him Kingfisher is active. He'll know what it means. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Kingfisher? What's? Just do it, Mr. Miller. And don't let that drive out of your sight. I swung the car hard on Elm Street, tires screeching. The police station appeared ahead. A small brick building with a few patrol cars parked outside. I had no idea if I could trust the police, but I was out of options. I screeched to a halt in front of the station and ran inside, the USB drive clutched in my hand. The SUVs were right behind me, but even Richard's men wouldn't shoot me in front of a police station. At least, I hope not. I need Detective Marcus. I shouted to the officer at the front desk. It's an emergency. Kingfisher is active. The officer's eyes widened. Without a word, he hit a button under his desk. Suddenly, officers appeared from every doorway, weapons drawn. Outside, I heard shouting as Richard's men were ordered to the ground. A tall black man with salt and pepper hair approached me. I'm Marcus. Come with me. He led me quickly through a back hallway into a secure room with no windows. The drive. Now, I handed it over, still trying to catch my breath. What's Kingfisher? Marcus inserted the drive into a computer. It's a confidential operation we've been running for 14 months to bring down Richard Blackwood and his entire network. He looked at me with newfound respect. Sarah Blackwood is our key informant. My jaw dropped. Sarah's been working with you? For over a year. Marcus nodded, scrolling through the files. She came to us after she discovered what her husband was really doing with his import business. She's been gathering evidence from the inside, putting herself at enormous risk. He pointed to the screen. This is the final piece we needed, the complete money trail linking Blackwood to the trafficking operation. Then why did Richard try to kill her? I asked, still struggling to process this new information. Because yesterday, one of our undercover officers was exposed. Blackwood realized there was an investigation. He must have suspected Sarah. Marcus picked up his phone. Chun, it's Marcus. Miller delivered the package. All files intact. He listened for a moment. Understood. He turned back to me. Sarah needs extraction from that hospital immediately. Blackwood will try again to silence her now that he knows the drive is missing. I need to go with you, I insisted. Marcus shook his head. Too dangerous. You're a civilian. I'm the one who found her in that casket, I argued. I'm the one she trusted with the evidence. And I know the hospital inside and out, all the service corridors, the security blind spots. I cleaned them for years. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Fine, but you follow my orders exactly. Understood. I nodded, relief washing over me. Sarah had been fighting Richard all this time, risking her life to bring him down. The woman I'd once loved, the woman I thought had abandoned me for a rich man's lifestyle, was actually a hero. As we prepared to leave, a TV in the corner of the room caught my attention. Richard Blackwood's face filled the screen, standing in front of Memorial General Hospital, looking appropriately concerned as reporters thrust microphones toward him. My wife suffered a terrible medical error, he was saying, his voice cracking with well-practiced emotion. She's still recovering, but we're grateful for the quick action of the hospital staff. However, I must warn the public about a disturbed individual who has been harassing our family during this difficult time. My photo appeared on the screen, an old driver's license picture where I looked haggard and unshaven. This man, Frank Miller, is my wife's ex-husband. He has a history of mental instability and substance abuse. Today he forced his way into the funeral home, making bizarre accusations, and later attempted to enter my wife's hospital room unauthorized. If you see this man, do not approach him. Contact the police immediately, as he may be armed and dangerous. Marcus switched off the TV. Blackwood's playing defense. He's trying to discredit you before you can expose him. He's also making sure every cop in the city is looking for me, I said bitterly. Not every cop, Marcus replied, checking his weapon. Some of us still remember which side of the law we're on. He handed me a bulletproof vest. Put this on. We move in 15 minutes. As I strapped on the vest, I thought about Sarah lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by Richard's people. For 8 years, I tried to forget her. I told myself she'd chosen money over love, luxury over loyalty. But I'd been wrong. She was braver than I ever knew, and now I had a chance to save her, if we weren't already too late. Marcus, I said as we headed for the door, there's something else you should know. Sarah was drugged with something that mimicked death. If Richard's planning to try again. Marcus nodded grimly. He might use the same method. Make it look like she relapsed and died from the original condition. A tragic but natural death. We need to hurry, I said, a cold fear gripping my heart. As we stepped outside, Rebecca Chun was waiting by an unmarked car. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with intense eyes and the focused energy of someone who never wasted a minute. Mr. Miller, she said, shaking my hand. Sarah told me about you. She said if anything happened to her, you'd be the one person who couldn't be bought or scared off. She smiled slightly. She was right. Let's go get her, I said, climbing into the back seat. As we drove toward the hospital, I couldn't help but wonder what else I didn't know about Sarah, and whether we'd make it in time to ask her ourselves. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing in the darkness like a giant beehive. Police cars lined the entrance, some there to protect Sarah, others probably on Richard's payroll. It was impossible to tell which were which. We can't go through the main entrance, I told Marcus and Chun as we parked a block away. Richard will have his people watching every door. What do you suggest? Chun asked, all business. The service entrance by the kitchen, the same one I told Denise about. I checked my watch. Shift change is at 9:30. The kitchen staff will be leaving, maintenance coming in. We can blend with them. Marcus nodded approvingly. Once we're inside, service elevator to the 4th floor, then through the east corridor. It bypasses the nurse's station. I used to take that route when I cleaned the executive suites after hours. We waited in silence until 9:25, then made our way to the back of the hospital. Just as I'd predicted, kitchen workers in white uniforms were streaming out, laughing and talking about their evening plans. We slipped in with a group of maintenance workers, Marcus and Chun in borrowed janitorial coats, me still in the scrubs I'd taken earlier. The service elevator was old and slow, but empty. As we rode up, Chun briefed us. Sarah's in room 412. According to our source inside, Richard has 2 private security guards posted outside. Dr. Phillips is on duty. He's one of Richard's people. And there's a nurse we can't identify. Denise? I asked, worried. She's the one who gave me Sarah's blood work. We're not sure. The description matches, but she could be under duress. The elevator doors opened, and we stepped into a dimly lit corridor stacked with linens and medical supplies. I led the way, remembering the path from years of cleaning these halls late at night while wealthy patients slept in their private rooms. "Hold up," Marcus whispered, raising his hand. Ahead, the security guard was standing by the water fountain, talking on his phone. He wasn't in hospital security uniform. He had to be one of Richard's men. "Friend, it's moments like these when you realize how far you'll go to protect someone you care about. If you're with me and want to know what happened when we finally confronted Richard's men, tap that subscribe button now. Because what we found in that hospital room changed everything." Marcus motioned us back, then whispered to Chun. She nodded and walked forward alone, her posture changing completely. Suddenly, she was just a tired hospital administrator, walking with the slightly slumped shoulders of someone at the end of a long day. "Excuse me," she said to the guard as she approached. "Are you here for the Blackwood detail?" The guard straightened. "Who's asking?" Chun flashed what looked like a badge. "Hospital security. Mr. Blackwood asked for additional coverage on the west entrance. Your team is needed there immediately." The guard looked suspicious. I wasn't informed about any. In one fluid motion, Marcus appeared behind him, pressing something to the guard's neck. The man slumped, and Marcus caught him before he hit the ground. "Sedative," Marcus explained, dragging the unconscious man into a supply closet. "He'll wake up with a headache. Nothing more." We continued down the corridor, moving quickly now. Room 412 was at the far end, around a corner from the nurse's station. As we approached, I saw another guard standing outside the door, arms crossed. "Same plan?" Chin asked Marcus. He nodded, but I stopped them. "Wait, something's wrong." The guard looked too relaxed, almost bored, and there were no sounds coming from the nurse's station. No beeping monitors, no squeaking shoes on linoleum. Nothing. "It's too quiet," I whispered. "There should be activity, even at night." Marcus signaled us to stay back. He approached the corner cautiously, then quickly pulled back. "Floor's empty," he said tensely. "No nurses, no patients in the other rooms. They've cleared the entire wing." "It's a trap," Chun realized. "Blackwood knew we'd come for her." My heart raced. "Or they've already moved her. We need to check that room." Marcus pulled out his gun. "I'll go first. Chun, cover the elevator. Miller, stay behind me." We crept forward. The guard saw us coming and reached inside his jacket, but Marcus was faster. "Police. Hands where I can see them." The guard raised his hands slowly, a smirk on his face. "You're too late," he said calmly. "She's gone." Marcus handcuffed the man to a nearby railing while I rushed to room 412. The door was unlocked. Inside, the bed was empty, the sheets rumpled. Medical equipment had been disconnected in a hurry, left dangling from their stands. "Where is she?" I demanded, grabbing the guard by his collar. "Where did Blackwood take her?" The guard just smiled. "Probably halfway to the private airfield by now. Mr. Blackwood's jet was fueled and ready an hour ago." Chun was on her phone immediately. "This is DA Chun. I need all units to Blackwood Airfield now. Suspect is attempting to flee with a kidnapping victim." The guard laughed. "You think he'd use his own airfield when he knows you're onto him? He's not stupid." My mind raced. If not Blackwood Airfield, where would Richard take her? Then I remembered something from the files on the USB drive. Coordinates for a small private airstrip outside town. It had appeared in several of the trafficking documents. "Check the files for Rocky Point Airstrip," I told Chun. "It's small, unmarked on most maps. He's used it for his trafficking operation." Chun relayed the information, then turned to me. "That's 30 minutes from here if we hurry." "Go," Marcus said, still covering the guard. "I'll secure the hospital and check for any evidence of where they're taking her. Miller, you know what Blackwood looks like, and Sarah knows you. Go with Chun." We raced back down the service corridor to the elevator. Just as the doors were about to close, a hand thrust through, stopping them. It was Denise. "Frank, thank God I found you." She was breathless, her scrubs wrinkled and her hair falling out of its ponytail. "They took Sarah 20 minutes ago. Dr. Phillips sedated her, and Richard's men moved her out through the morgue entrance." "How do you know this?" Chun asked suspiciously. "I was hiding in the supply closet," Denise said. "They thought I'd gone home, but I was waiting for Frank." I heard everything. Richard said they were taking her to his place in the Caymans where no one could find her. I looked at Chun. The file showed he has a private island there. We need to get to that airstrip now, Chun said, holding the elevator door for Denise. You coming? Denise nodded and stepped in. As we rode down, she pulled me aside. There's something else. Before they took her, Sarah woke up for a minute. She said to tell you second box. Does it mean anything? My mind raced. The butterfly box had been empty when Richard's men searched the storage unit. But Sarah had mentioned a second box in her letter, something only I would know about. Then it hit me. Years ago, when we'd first gotten married, I made Sarah a jewelry box as an anniversary gift. It wasn't fancy like the butterfly box, just a simple wooden box with her initials carved on top. She'd kept it on her bedside table. When we divorced, she'd left it behind. I'd packed it away in the storage unit, inside a box labeled bedroom, miscellaneous. It's at the storage unit, I said, my heart pounding. There might be something else there, something Richard doesn't know about. The elevator reached the ground floor. Chun looked at me. We don't have time. Sarah is our priority. You go to the airstrip, I decided. I'll check the storage unit and meet you there. If Sarah hid something else, we might need it. Chun didn't like it, but she nodded. Be careful. And hurry. Denise grabbed my arm. I'm coming with you. You might need backup. We split up in the parking lot. Chun sped off toward the airstrip with a police escort, while Denise and I took a patrol car and officer lent us after Chun vouched for me. The storage facility was only 10 minutes away. Who would have thought we'd end up here? Denise said as we drove. A nurse and a cleaner trying to bring down Richard Blackwood. You've risked a lot to help, I said gratefully. Why? You didn't even know Sarah. Denise stared out the window. Let's just say I have my reasons for hating men who hurt women. Men who think their money puts them above the law. We reached West Side Storage, and I unlocked Unit 327 again. The place was a mess from my earlier search. I went straight to a stack of boxes in the corner labeled bedroom. What does this box look like? Denise asked, helping me search. Wooden about this big. I showed her with my hands, with the initials SM carved on top. We dug through old clothes, books, and mementos from my marriage. Finally, at the bottom of a box filled with bedside table contents, I found it. The wooden box, exactly as I'd remembered it. This is it, I said, brushing off the dust. Inside were old earrings, a broken watch, and what looked like ticket stubs from movies we'd seen together. Nothing valuable, nothing that would help us. But when I picked up the box to put it back, I noticed it was heavier than it should be. I turned it over and examined the bottom. There was a seam I hadn't noticed before, just like the butterfly box. This one had a secret compartment too. I pressed the corner, and the false bottom popped open. Inside was a small black device, a voice recorder, and a handwritten note in Sarah's elegant script. Frank, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. This is the real evidence. The USB was a decoy. Play this for Rebecca, Chun only. I'm sorry for everything. I never stopped loving you. My hands trembled as I held the recorder. Sarah had been 2 steps ahead of Richard all along. The USB drive was meant to be found, maybe even meant to lead Richard's men to it while the real evidence stayed hidden. We need to get this to Chun, I said, pocketing the recorder. Now. As we hurried back to the car, my phone rang. Unknown number again. Miller? It's Marcus. Where are you? Just leaving the storage unit. Found something important. We're heading to the airstrip now. Change of plans, Marcus said urgently. They're not at Rocky Point. One of Richard's men talked. They're at the old county airfield, the one that's been closed for renovations. And Miller? They've got about a 15-minute head start. I relayed the information to Denise as we jumped in the car. County airfield. How fast can we get there? 20 minutes, even with lights and sirens, she said, starting the engine. But I know a shortcut through the industrial area. Might save us 5 minutes. We sped through the night, every second feeling like an eternity. All I could think about was Sarah on that plane, being taken somewhere we'd never find her. Somewhere Richard could finish what he'd started. Faster, I urged as Denise took a sharp turn down a narrow road between warehouses. Any faster and we'll crash, she said, but press the gas pedal harder anyway. The shortcut led us through an abandoned factory complex, the road barely visible in the darkness. As we rounded the final turn, bright headlights suddenly blinded us. A black SUV was blocking the road ahead. Denise slammed on the brakes, sending us into a skid. We stopped just inches from the SUV. More headlights appear behind us. We were trapped. Men in suits emerged for both vehicles, guns drawn. And from the SUV in front, a familiar figure stepped out. Dr. Phillips, still wearing his white coat over an expensive suit. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" he called out. "That you could just drive to the airfield and save the day? How did they find us?" I whispered to Denise. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached in her pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. A gun. But she didn't point it at Phillips or his men. She pointed it at me. "I'm sorry, Frank," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "Give me the recorder." The gun in Denise's hand didn't waver as she stared at me with eyes that had gone hard as stone. All the warmth, all the concern I'd seen before. It had been an act. A very good one. "The recorder, Frank," she repeated. "Now, and don't try anything stupid." My mind struggled to catch up with this betrayal. "You've been working for Richard all along." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Not exactly. Richard and I have mutual understanding. He pays very well for information." Outside, Dr. Phillips and his men were approaching cautiously, guns still trained on the car. "How did you know about the storage unit?" I asked, trying to buy time to think. "I didn't," Denise admitted. "That was a lucky guess. But I did put a tracker on you at the hospital, in your shoe when I helped you up after you pretended to be sick. Richard's people have been following you ever since." I remembered how she grabbed my arm to steady me after I'd looked at Sarah's blood work. It had seemed like a kind gesture at the time. Sarah's blood work. Was that fake too? No, that was real. Richard did try to kill her. I just adjusted the timeline to gain your trust. She gestured with the gun. "The recorder. Last chance. Friend, have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were playing you the whole time? It's a special kind of pain. If you're still with me and want to see how I turn the tables on the people who betrayed me, hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next is something I never saw coming." I slowly reached into my pocket, my mind racing for a way out. The recorder was our only leverage against Richard, the only way to save Sarah. I couldn't let Denise take it. "You won't get away with this," I said, stalling. "Chen and Marcus know where we are. The whole police department will be looking for us." Denise smiled coldly. "They're busy at Rocky Point Airfield, watching an empty runway. By the time they realize they've been sent on a wild goose chase, Richard and Sarah will be long gone." Her smile faded. "The recorder. Now." I pulled it halfway out of my pocket, then let it slip from my fingers to the floor of the car. "Oops." Denise's eyes flicked down for just a second. Long enough. I lunged across the seat, grabbing her wrist and forcing the gun upward. It went off, the shot deafening in the small space, shattering the windshield. Outside, Phillips and his men dug for cover, momentarily startled. I wrestled with Denise for the gun, my greater strength against her surprising skill. She'd clearly been trained. "You don't understand," she hissed as we struggled. "Richard will kill us both if I don't deliver." The gun went off again, this time blowing a hole in the roof. I finally managed to twist it from her grip and shoved her hard against the door. "Stay down," I ordered, pointing the gun at her while I groped on the floor for the recorder. Outside, Phillips was shouting orders. His men were surrounding the car. I had seconds, maybe less. I found the recorder and shoved it back in my pocket. Then I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a small silver lighter in the cup holder. Standard police issue. This wasn't just any patrol car. It was a tactical unit vehicle. Which meant, I popped open the glove compartment. There it was, a flashbang grenade. Standard equipment for high-risk operations. I grabbed it, keeping the gun trained on Denise. "What are you going to do?" she asked, eyeing the grenade fearfully. "Create a distraction," I said grimly. I pulled the pin, counted to 2, then threw the grenade out through the shattered windshield. I ducked down, pulling Denise with me just as the world exploded in blinding light and deafening sound. The men outside screamed, temporarily blinded and disoriented. I took advantage of the chaos, kicking open the driver's door and dragging Denise out with me. We needed cover, and fast. I pulled her toward a stack of old shipping containers, staying low. Behind us, Phillips was shouting for his men to find us, but they were still recovering from the flashbang. "Why are you taking me?" Denise demanded as I shoved her behind one of the containers. "Because you're my ticket out of here," I said, checking the gun. 3 bullets left. Not much, but it would have to do. "How many men does Phillips have?" 6, including him, she said after a moment's hesitation. All armed. All ex-military. Great. 6 trained killers against 1 janitor with 3 bullets and a hostage who'd already proven untrustworthy. What's Richard planning to do with Sarah? I asked, peering around the edge of the container. Phillips's men had recovered and were spreading out, searching methodically. Take her to his island in the Caymans. Once she's there, she'll have a tragic accident. Drowning, probably. Denise's voice was flat, emotionless. And you're okay with that? Helping him murder an innocent woman? Something flickered in Denise's eyes. She's not so innocent. And in this world, you either pick the winning side or you end up in the ground. Is that what happened to your sister? I asked, remembering what she told me earlier about losing a sister to an abusive man. Was that part of your act too? Denise looked away. Not everything was a lie. Before I could respond, gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the metal container above our heads. They'd found us. We need to move, I said, grabbing Denise's arm. Which way to the county airfield from here? 2 miles north, she said, pointing. But we'll never make it on foot. I looked around desperately. The factory complex was abandoned, but there might be something we could use. Then I spotted it, an old maintenance shed about 50 yards away. If we were lucky, there might be a vehicle inside. Cover your ears, I told Denise. Then I fired one of our precious bullets high into the air. The shot echoed through the complex. As I'd hoped, Phillips's men all turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. Now, I pulled Denise to her feet, and we ran toward the shed, keeping low and using the containers for cover. Bullets zinged past us, but the darkness and the maze of containers worked in our favor. We reached the shed, and I tried the door. Locked, of course. I used another bullet to shoot off the padlock, wincing at the noise. We slipped inside, just as flashlight beams swept across the area behind us. The shed was dark and musty, filled with tools and equipment left behind when the factory closed. And there, under a tarp, was exactly what I'd hoped for, an old maintenance truck. Please have keys, I muttered, pulling back the tarp. There they were, hanging from the ignition. Someone had left them behind, probably figuring no one would steal this rust bucket. It won't start, Denise predicted. It's been sitting here for years. I climbed into the driver's seat anyway, saying a silent prayer as I turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Get in, I ordered Denise, keeping the gun pointed at her. And don't try anything. She climbed in beside me, surprisingly compliant now. Maybe she decided her best chance for survival was with me rather than Phillips and his trigger-happy crew. I threw the truck into gear and smashed through the shed's wooden doors, accelerating into the dark factory yard. Shouts and gunfire erupted behind us, but I kept going, zigzagging between buildings and containers until we reached the access road. 2 miles north. I confirmed with Denise. She nodded. But we're still too late. The plane was scheduled to leave at 11. It's nearly 11:30 now. I checked my watch. She was right. We were too late to stop the plane. But maybe not too late to save Sarah. I drove like a madman down the deserted industrial roads, finally turning onto a narrow track that led to the old county airfield. The truck bounced and rattled over the uneven ground, threatening to shake apart with every bump. As we approached, I could see the small airfield ahead, a single runway with minimal lighting and a small control tower that had been closed for months due to renovations. And there, on the runway, was a sleek private jet, engines running, stairs still down. They're still here. I breathed, hardly daring to believe our luck. Doesn't matter, Denise said. Look, armed men were stationed around the plane. Even from this distance, I could count at least 8 of them. And standing at the bottom of the stairs, illuminated by the plane's lights, was Richard Blackwood himself, checking his watch impatiently. Where's Sarah? I asked, straining to see inside the plane. Probably already on board, sedated again, Denise said. Richard wouldn't risk her making a scene. I killed the engine and the lights, letting the truck roll to a stop behind some bushes 100 yards from the runway. We could see them, but they couldn't see us. What's your plan now, hero? Denise asked sarcastically. 1 bullet against 8 armed guards and Richard Blackwood. She was right. I couldn't shoot my way in, but maybe I didn't need to. I pulled out my phone and the voice recorder. I still had one chance to save Sarah, but I need help. What are you doing? Denise asked as I dialed. Calling him backup, I said as the phone connected. Rebecca? It's Frank. I know where they're taking Sarah. County Airfield. And I have the real evidence. A voice recorder Sarah left. It's Richard's voice, admitting to everything. Chen's voice was tight, with controlled fury. We were just leaving Rocky Point. Phillips sent us there as a diversion. We're 30 minutes out from your location. The plane's about to leave. We don't have 30 minutes. Keep them there, Frank. Any way you can. I've got state police and FBI en route. I ended the call and looked at Denise. I need a distraction. A big one. She frowned. What are you thinking? I pointed to a fuel storage tank near the edge of the runway. That's still in use. Denise followed my gaze. Should be. They need it for refueling small aircraft. I checked the recorder, making sure it was working. Then I handed Denise the gun. Empty now, but she didn't know that. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to create a distraction while I get on that plane and find Sarah. She looked at the gun, then at me. Why would I help you? Because when the FBI gets here, they're going to arrest everyone involved in Richard's operation, including you. I held up the recorder. Unless I tell them you helped save Sarah, then maybe you get a deal. Denise considered this, her calculating mind visibly weighing the options. Finally, she nodded. What kind of distraction? I pointed to the fuel tank again. The biggest one you can make. Give me 3 minutes to circle around to the other side of the plane. Then light it up. She raised an eyebrow. With what? An empty gun. I reached into the truck's glove compartment and found what I was hoping for. Road flares. Standard emergency equipment. I handed one to Denise. 3 minutes. I repeated. Not a second sooner. I started to move away, but Denise grabbed my arm. Frank, Richard won't let her go. Even if you get on that plane, he'll kill you both. Then I'll die trying. I said simply. Some things are worth dying for. I slipped away into the darkness, circling wide around the airfield to approach the plane from the opposite side. The runway lights cast long shadows that gave me cover as I moved. In the distance, I could see Richard checking his watch again, then speaking angrily to one of his men. They were waiting for something, or someone. Phillips. They were waiting for Phillips to deliver the recorder, which meant I had a small window of opportunity before they realized something had gone wrong. I reached the edge of the runway just as a massive explosion rocked the night. Denise had done her job. The fuel tank was a blazing inferno, flames shooting 50 feet into the air. Richard's men all turned toward the fire, shouting and running to investigate. Richard himself hesitated, looking from the fire to the plane and back again. Then he made his decision, hurrying up the stairs into the jet. He wasn't going to let a fire delay his escape. This was my chance. I sprinted across the tarmac, staying in the shadows until the last possible moment. The stairs were starting to retract as I made my final dash, leaping onto them just as they began to lift off the ground. I pulled myself up and into the plane, collapsing on the luxurious carpet of the entry area. The door was already sealed behind me. Through a small window, I could see Richard's men running back from the fire, realizing too late that someone had boarded the plane. I didn't have much time. I moved quickly through the cabin, the recorder clutched in my hand. The plane was the definition of luxury: leather seats, wood paneling, a fully stocked bar. But no sign of Richard or Sarah. Then I heard voices from the rear compartment, a private bedroom. Richard's voice, angry and urgent. We need to take off now. My men will deal with the fire. Where's Phillips? He should have been here with that recorder. Another voice, the pilot, I assumed, responded. Sir, we can't leave yet. The tower has ordered all aircraft to stay grounded until the fire is contained. Override it. That's what I pay you for. I crept closer to the door, trying to hear if Sarah was inside. Then I heard a soft moan, barely audible, but definitely a woman's voice. Sarah. She was alive, but probably still heavily sedated. I needed to act now, before Richard realized I was on board. I pressed record on the voice recorder, then threw open the door. Richard spun around, his perfect composure finally shattered. He was standing over a bed where Sarah lay, and four in her arm. A medical bag hung beside her, steadily dripping what I assumed were sedatives into her system. Miller, Richard snarled. How did you get on my plane? It's over, Richard, I said, holding up the recorder. The FBI is on their way. They know everything. The trafficking, the money laundering, the attempted murder. Sarah's been gathering evidence against you for months. Richard's eyes narrowed. Phillips was supposed to get that recorder. Where is he? Probably still chasing shadows in the factory district. I said, moving toward Sarah. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. The floor was keeping her just conscious enough to breathe on her own, but not enough to fight or call for help. I'm taking her off this plane. Richard laughed, his composure returning. You're not taking her anywhere. And you're not leaving this plane either. Not alive, anyway. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pistol. Did you really think you could stop me? A washed-up paramedic turned janitor. I kept the recorder running, hoping to capture his confession. Why did you do it, Richard? You had everything, money, power, a wife who loved you. Why risk it all? Sarah never loved me. Richard spat. She was using me from the beginning, getting close to my business, my associates, playing the devoted wife while she gathered evidence. His face twisted with rage. Do you know how much money I've lost because of her? How many deals fell apart because she warned the authorities? So you decided to kill her. Richard shrugged, the gun steady in his hand. It was a business decision. She became a liability. I couldn't divorce her. She knew too much. So I found a more permanent solution. The drugs that mimic death, I said. You were going to bury her alive. It would have been peaceful, Richard said, almost offended. She would have simply never woken up. But you had to interfere. He gestured to Sarah with the gun. Now I'll have to be more direct. A plane crash at sea. Very tragic. No bodies ever recovered. He was confessing to everything, not realizing or caring that the recorder was capturing every word. But it wouldn't matter if I couldn't get Sarah and myself off this plane. You'll never get away with it, I said, still trying to buy time. Too many people know what you've done. Richard smiled coldly. People can be bought or silenced. Your friend Shin, she's been after me for years, but she's never been able to prove anything. And she never will. Outside, I could hear sirens approaching. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? Richard heard them too. His face hardened. Enough talk. Sit down and shut up. We're taking off now. He pressed a button on the wall. Captain, we're leaving. Immediately, the plane's engines roared louder, and I felt a slight movement as we began to taxi. We were out of time. I looked at Sarah, still barely conscious on the bed. I had one chance, one desperate move. I lunged toward her, grabbing the foreline and yanking it from her arm. Richard fired, the bullet grazing my shoulder. The pain was immediate and searing, but I kept moving, throwing myself at Richard before he could fire again. We crashed to the floor, struggling for the gun. Richard was stronger than he looked, his rage giving him power. The gun went off again, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. You're nothing. Richard screamed in my face. And nobody. You think you can stop me? I own this town. I own the police, the judges, everyone. The plane was moving faster now, preparing for takeoff. Through the window, I could see emergency lights approaching the airfield, but they were still too far away. In our struggle, the voice recorder had fallen to the floor, still running, capturing Richard's every word. He saw it now, his eyes widening as he realized what it was. The recorder, he gasped. That's what Phillips was supposed to get. It's over, Richard, I said, still fighting for the gun. Even if you kill us, they'll know what you did. With a roar of fury, Richard kneed me in the stomach, temporarily gaining the upper hand. He aimed the gun at my head. Goodbye, Mr. Miller. I'll be sure to give Sarah your regards before her unfortunate accident. I closed my eyes, waiting for the shot. Instead, I heard a dull thud and Richard's grunt of pain. I opened my eyes to see Sarah standing over him, a heavy crystal decanter from the bar gripped in her hands. She'd hit Richard from behind, buying me a precious moment. Frank, she whispered, her voice weak from the drugs. Help me. I scrambled to my feet, wresting the gun from Richard's stunned grasp. He was already recovering, lunging toward us with murderous rage. The plane was picking up speed, about to take off. I grabbed Sarah with one arm, supporting her weight. With the other, I aimed the gun at the emergency exit door. Hold on to me. I shouted to Sarah over the roar of the engines. I fired 3 shots into the door's locking mechanism. With a hiss of depressurization, the door blew outward. The sudden loss of pressure sent papers and loose items flying. Richard was thrown back against the wall. The plane was still on the ground, but moving fast. It was now or never. Jump, I shouted, holding Sarah tight against me. We leaped from the moving plane, hitting the tarmac hard and rolling. Pain exploded through my injured shoulder, and Sarah cried out as we tumbled across the rough surface. Behind us, the The plane continued down the runway, the emergency door flapping in the wind. Emergency vehicles were swarming the airfield now. Police cars, FBI, even a fire truck for the still-burning fuel tank. The plane had stopped at the end of the runway, surrounded by law enforcement with guns drawn. I lay on my back, staring up at the night sky, Sarah's weight across my chest. We were alive. Bruised, bleeding, but alive. Sarah raised her head weakly, looking at me with those eyes I'd never forgotten. "You came for me," she whispered. "Always," I promised, holding her close as the authorities rushed toward us. Always. In the chaos that followed, the arrests, the medical attention, the endless questions, I kept the voice recorder clutched in my hand. Richard's confession, captured word for word. The evidence that would finally bring him down. And as they loaded Sarah into an ambulance, her hand reached for mine, refusing to let go. In her eyes, I saw something I thought I'd lost forever. A future. A second chance. But Richard Blackwood wasn't done with us yet. Not by a long shot. The next few hours blurred together like a bad dream. Red and blue lights flashing everywhere. FBI agents in bulletproof vests swarming the airfield. Paramedics working on Sarah and me, asking questions I was too tired to answer. Someone kept pressing gauze against my shoulder where Richard's bullet had grazed me. It stung, but the pain seemed far away, like it was happening to someone else. "Frank, can you hear me?" Rebecca Chun was suddenly in front of me, her face tight with concern. "I need the recorder. Now." I handed it over, my fingers stiff from holding it so tightly. "It's all there. Everything." Richard confessed to trying to kill Sarah, to human trafficking. Everything. Chin nodded, slipping the recorder into an evidence bag. "You did good, Frank. Better than good. You're a hero." I shook my head. "I'm just a cleaner who was in the right place at the right time." My eyes drifted to the ambulance where they were loading Sarah. "How is she?" "Stable. They're taking her to County General. The drugs are still in her system, but the doctor says she'll make a full recovery." Chin squeezed my good shoulder. "You should get that wound properly treated." "I will, I promised. After I know Sarah's safe." A commotion near the plane caught our attention. FBI agents were escorting Richard Blackwood down the stairs in handcuffs. Even now, even after everything, he looked composed. His suit was rumpled and his hair messed up, but he walked with his head high, like this was all some minor inconvenience. Our eyes met across the tarmac. The hatred in his gaze burned hotter than the fuel tank Denise had set ablaze. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but could easily guess. "This isn't over. Friend, they say the most dangerous moment with a predator is when they're cornered." And Richard Blackwood was the most dangerous kind of predator. Rich, powerful, and now desperate. If you want to see how a man like that fights when he has nothing left to lose, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happened next nearly cost us everything. "We need to move Richard to a secure facility immediately," Chun was saying to Marcus, who had arrived shortly after us. "No stops, no delays. Straight to federal custody." Marcus nodded. "What about Miller? Blackwood's got friends everywhere. He might not be safe." "I'm not leaving Sarah," I said firmly. Chun looked like she wanted to argue, but just nodded. "We'll put guards on both of you at the hospital. Until Blackwood's network is completely dismantled, neither of you is safe." As they loaded me into a separate ambulance, I caught sight of Denise being handcuffed near a police car. Our eyes met briefly. I couldn't read her expression. Was it regret? Calculation? Or just resignation? Whatever her game had been, it was over now. At County General, they cleaned and bandaged my shoulder, gave me painkillers, and tried to make me rest. But I couldn't. Not until I saw Sarah. Not until I knew for sure she was really okay. "She's sleeping," the nurse told me when I asked for the 10th time. "The doctor says she needs rest while the drugs clear her system. You can see her in the morning." But I wouldn't be put off. "Please, I just need to see her. 5 minutes." Maybe it was the desperation in my voice, or maybe the nurse had heard what happened. Either way, she softened. 5 minutes. Room 514. But if anyone asks, I didn't tell you. Sarah's room was dim and quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors. 2 FBI agents stood outside her door, checking my ID before letting me in. Inside, Sarah lay still, her face pale against the white pillow, and 4 dripped fluids into her arm. Medicine this time, not sedatives. I pulled a chair close to her bed and gently took her hand. It felt small and cool in mine. "I'm here, Sarah," I whispered. "You're safe now." Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. It took a moment for her gaze to focus on me. "Frank," she murmured, "you came for me." "Always," I said again, squeezing her hand. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You found the second box." "I did. The recorder. It caught everything. Richard confessed to all of it." I leaned closer. "Why didn't you tell me, Sarah? About working with the DA? About what Richard was doing? I could have helped you." Sadness filled her eyes. "I wanted to. So many times. But it was too dangerous. Richard had people watching me constantly. If he'd suspected I was gathering evidence." She shuddered. "I couldn't risk your life, too. So instead you risked your own," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "Why? You could have just left him." Sarah's fingers tightened around mine. "Because of the girls, Frank. The women he was trafficking. Some of them just teenagers. I couldn't walk away knowing what was happening. Not when I had a chance to stop it." In that moment, I saw Sarah, really saw her, for the first time in years. Not as my ex-wife who'd left me for a rich man, but as the brave, compassionate woman she'd always been. The woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Rest now," I told her, gently brushing hair from her forehead. "It's over. Richard's been arrested. Chin has the evidence. You did it, Sarah. You brought him down." She smiled faintly, her eyes already closing again. "We did it. Together." I stayed until her breathing deepened into sleep, then reluctantly left when a nurse came to check her vitals. In the hallway, Agent Marcus was waiting for me. "How is she?" he asked. "Tired, but she's going to be okay." I rubbed my eyes, suddenly exhausted myself. "What happens now?" "Now you both get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll need official statements." Marcus glanced at the agents guarding Sarah's door. "We've got people watching every entrance to the hospital. No one gets near either of you without clearance." I nodded, too tired to argue. They'd given me a room down the hall from Sarah's, with my own guard outside. I collapsed onto the bed without even taking off my shoes, the events of the day finally catching up to me. I must have fallen asleep instantly, because the next thing I knew, someone was shaking me awake. Early morning light filtered through the blinds. Chun stood over me, her face grim. "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly alert. Sarah's fine," Chun assured me quickly. "But we have a problem. A big one." I sat up, wincing as pain shot through my injured shoulder. "What kind of problem?" Chin held up her phone, showing me a news headline. "Blackwood wife caught in love triangle. Ex-husband's jealous rage leads to false accusations against prominent businessman." "What the hell is this?" I demanded, grabbing the phone. "Richard's lawyers are already spinning the story," Chun said grimly. "They're claiming you've been stalking Sarah since the divorce, that you fabricated evidence against Richard out of jealousy. That's insane. We have a recorder. We have his confession." Chin took the phone back, her expression somber. "That's the other problem. The recorder is missing from the evidence lockup." My blood ran cold. "Missing? How is that possible?" "Someone on the inside. Richard's reach is even longer than we thought." Chun paced the small hospital room. "Without that recording, it's your word against his. And Blackwood has half the city's elite ready to testify to his character. What about Sarah? She can testify to what he did. They're already painting her as mentally unstable, claiming she had a breakdown after mixing prescription medications." Chin's face hardened. "The narrative they're pushing is that you took advantage of her confused state to manipulate her against her husband." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Richard was in federal custody. We had him dead to rights. And yet somehow, he was still controlling the story. "There has to be something we can do," I said, getting to my feet. "What about the USB drive? The financial records? Being analyzed. But Richard's lawyers are already claiming they're forgeries. They've got experts ready to testify that the documents were fabricated." I felt sick. After everything we'd been through, Richard might actually get away with it all. The trafficking, the money laundering, trying to murder Sarah. All of it buried under expensive lawyers and media manipulation. "Wait," I said suddenly, remembering something. The recorder wasn't the only copy. Chin's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "My phone. When I was on the plane with Richard, I started recording on my phone too, just as backup. I wasn't sure if the voice recorder was still working after everything that happened." Hope flashed across Chin's face. "Where's your phone now?" I patted my pockets, then froze. My phone was gone. I had at the airfield. Maybe it fell out when Sarah and I jumped from the plane. Chen was already on her radio. I need a team back at County Airfield. Search the area where Miller and Blackwood exited the aircraft. We're looking for a phone. It's crucial evidence. She turned back to me. Get dressed. If we're going to counter Richard's narrative, we need to move fast. I want both you and Sarah someplace safe while we look for that phone. Safe? I thought the hospital was secure. Chen's expression was deadly serious. 2 of the guards assigned to this floor called in sick this morning. Their replacements had proper ID, but weren't on our approved list. We caught it in time, but it means Richard's people are already making moves. We need to relocate you now. My mind raced. Even from custody, Richard was orchestrating a plan. The missing recorder, the media spin, the attempted breach at the hospital. He was trying to rewrite the entire narrative while simultaneously getting to Sarah and me. Where will you take us? I asked, grabbing my clothes. Somewhere Richard won't expect. Chen, check her watch. Be ready in 5 minutes. And Frank, don't trust anyone but me or Marcus. No one. As Chun left to make arrangements, my thoughts turned to Sarah. After everything she'd been through, she was still in danger. We both were. And now our credibility was being destroyed in the press before we could even tell our side of the story. I dressed quickly, my shoulder protesting with every movement. Through the window, I could see news vans gathering outside the hospital. Richard's media machine was in full swing. Chen returned with Marcus and 2 agents she personally vouched for. Ready? We're moving Sarah now. You'll follow right after in a separate vehicle. I want to stay with Sarah, I insisted. Chen shook her head. Too risky. If Richard's people make a move, I don't want you both in the same place. Where are you taking her? The less you know right now, the better, Chun said, checking the hallway. Marcus will take you to a safe house. I'll bring Sarah once she's secure. I didn't like it, but I understood the logic. If they caught one of us, they couldn't make us reveal the other's location. Let me just see her before we go, I pleaded. 1 minute, that's all I'm asking. Chun hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute. Then we move. Sarah was awake when I entered her room, already dressed in clothes someone had brought her. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear. They told me what's happening, she said as I approached. Richard's trying to discredit us. I took her hands in mine. It won't work. We know the truth. And so does Chun. Frank, listen to me. Sarah's voice was urgent. Richard won't stop. Even from jail, he'll keep coming after us. There's something you don't know, something I haven't told anyone yet. A knock at the door interrupted us. Time to go, Chen called. What is it? I asked quickly. Sarah, what haven't you told me? She leaned close, her lips near my ear. Richard has a partner, someone bigger than him. That's what this was all about. The trafficking, the money laundering. Richard was just a middleman. The real power is... The door opened, and Chen stepped in. Now, Frank. Sarah squeezed my hands one last time, her eyes conveying what she hadn't been able to say. Be careful. Trust no one. Marcus led me through back corridors of the hospital, avoiding the press gathered outside. We exited through the service entrance where a nondescript sedan waited. I climbed in the back while Marcus took the wheel. Another agent I didn't recognize sat in the passenger seat. Where are we going? I asked as we pulled away from the hospital. Safe house about an hour outside the city, Marcus said, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for tails. Off the grid. No one knows about it except Chun and me. We drove in tense silence, taking a complicated route with frequent turns to ensure we weren't being followed. I tried to focus on the road, on our surroundings, but my mind kept returning to Sarah's words. Richard has a partner, someone bigger than him. What had she been about to tell me? And why hadn't she shared this information with Chen already? After about 40 minutes, we turned onto a rural road, then onto an even smaller dirt track that wound through dense trees. Finally, a small cabin came into view, isolated and surrounded by woods. Home sweet home, Marcus said, parking behind the cabin where the car wouldn't be visible from the road. It's not fancy, but it's secure. Inside, the cabin was basic but clean. A main room with a kitchenette, a small bedroom, and a bathroom. No phone, no internet, no TV. Just the bare necessities. Chen will bring Sarah here once she's clear of the hospital, Marcus explained, checking the windows and doors. In the meantime, try to get some rest. There's food in the fridge, first aid supplies in the bathroom. What about my phone? I asked. Any word on whether they found it at the airfield? Marcus shook his head. Not yet, but they're still searching. He handed me a burner phone. Only use this for emergencies. It connects directly to me or Chun. The other agent remained silent, taking a position by the front window where he could watch the approach to the cabin. I'll be back with Chun and Sarah in a few hours, Marcus said, heading for the door. Agent Kowalski will stay with you. After Marcus left, I tried to rest on the small sofa, but couldn't settle. My mind kept racing, replaying everything that had happened. Something wasn't adding up. Sarah's final warning echoed in my thoughts. Richard has a partner. Mind if I get some water? I asked Kowalski, who hadn't moved from his position by the window. He nodded without speaking. I went to the kitchenette and opened the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. As I straightened up, something caught my eye, a reflection in the window above the sink. Kowalski had shifted position slightly, his hand moving inside his jacket. My instinct screamed danger. I didn't know this man. Chin had said not to trust anyone but her or Marcus. And Kowalski had barely spoken 2 words since we'd left the hospital. Moving casually, I took a drink from the water bottle, using the motion to glance out the window again. There was movement in the trees behind the cabin, just a flash of something dark moving between the trunks. Everything okay? Kowalski asked, his voice unnaturally calm. Fine, I said, my mouth suddenly dry despite the water. Just tired. I needed a weapon, something to defend myself with. My eyes scanned the kitchenette quickly. A knife block sat on the counter, but it was too far away. I'd never reach it before Kowalski could react. The burner phone in my pocket felt heavy. I could try to call Marcus, but that would mean turning my back on Kowalski to dial. A soft creak from the back door made my decision for me. Someone was trying to enter the cabin. Kowalski heard it too, but instead of looking alarmed, he smiled slightly. In one fluid motion, he drew his gun. Sit down, Mr. Miller, he said quietly. We have a lot to discuss. The back door opened, and 2 men entered. The same men who had driven me to Richard's office the day before. Kowalski wasn't FBI. He was one of Richard's people, which meant, where's Marcus? I demanded, my heart pounding. Kowalski chuckled. Detective Marcus is taking a little nap by the side of the road. He'll wake up with a headache, but otherwise unharmed. Mr. Blackwood doesn't want any dead law enforcement officers. Too much scrutiny. Blackwood is in federal custody, I said, trying to buy time to think of a way out. For now, one of the other men said, but not for long. Not once we've cleaned up all the loose ends. He looked me up and down. Starting with you. I understood now. This wasn't a safe house. It was a trap, and Sarah was being brought here next. Where's Chun? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Miss Chun is on her way here with Mrs. Blackwood, just as planned, Kowalski said. Unfortunately, they'll find a cabin empty when they arrive. And by tomorrow, your bodies will be discovered in that old factory district. A murder-suicide. The jealous ex-husband, unable to handle rejection, killed Mrs. Blackwood before turning the gun on himself. Richard's final plan was taking shape before my eyes. With Sarah and me dead, there would be no one to testify against him. The missing evidence would stay missing, and the media narrative of a jealous ex-husband would be cemented forever. You won't get away with this, I said, the words sounding hollow, even to my own ears. We already have, Kowalski replied, gesturing with his gun. Now move. We have a schedule to keep. As the men closed in, I knew I had one last chance. One desperate move. I threw the water bottle at Kowalski's face with all my strength, then lunged for the kitchen counter, grabbing the first weapon I could find, a cast iron skillet hanging from a hook. Kowalski fired, the bullet splintering the cabinet beside my head. I swung the skillet hard, connecting with his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. The other 2 men rushed me, but the kitchen was narrow, forcing them to come one at a time. I fought like a cornered animal, swinging the heavy pan with desperate strength. One man went down, clutching his bleeding face. The other grabbed me from behind, his arm around my throat. Enough, he growled in my ear. You're only making this harder on yourself. I slammed my head back, feeling the crunch of his nose breaking. His grip loosened enough for me to break free. I dove for Kowalski's gun, my fingers closing around the grip just as the 3rd man tackled me. We rolled across the floor, struggling for the weapon. He was stronger, heavier, but I was fighting for my life, and for Sarah's. With a surge of desperate strength, I twisted the gun toward him and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the small cabin. The man's eyes widened in shock, then emptied as he slumped on top of me. I pushed him off, scrambling to my feet. Kowalski was recovering, reaching for a backup weapon at his ankle. I didn't hesitate. I fired again, hitting him in the shoulder. He howled in pain, falling back against the wall. The third man was already running, heading for the door. I let him go. I needed him to lead me to Richard, to the partner Sarah had mentioned. Kowalski clutched his bleeding shoulder, his face twisted with pain and hatred. "You're dead, Miller. You and the bitch both. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Then tell me," I said, keeping the gun trained on him. "Who's Richard's partner? Who's really behind all this?" A cold smile spread across Kowalski's face. "You think Blackwood is the big fish? He's nothing. Errand boy. The real power." He laughed, a chilling sound. "You've already met him. He's been watching you this whole time." A vehicle approached outside, the sound of tires on the dirt road. Chun and Sarah, walking into the same trap I had. "Who?" I demanded, pressing the gun against Kowalski's wounded shoulder, making him gasp in pain. "Give me a name." The smile never left his face, even through the pain. "Why don't you ask your friend? The one who's been playing both sides from the beginning." The vehicle outside came to a stop. Car doors opened and closed. I had seconds to warn Sarah and Chun. "Last chance," I told Kowalski. "A name." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Detective Marcus. He's been Richard's inside man from the beginning. Why do you think he brought you to this isolated cabin? Why do you think he left you with me?" The front door began to open. I spun around, gun raised, ready to protect Sarah from whoever was coming through. But it wasn't Sarah or Chun who stepped through the door. It was Marcus, and he wasn't alone. Marcus stood in the doorway, gun drawn, eyes quickly taking in the scene. One man dead on the floor, another wounded against the wall, and me holding Kowalski's weapon. Behind Marcus was Rebecca Chun, her expression shocked, and behind her, pale but determined, was Sarah. "Frank." Sarah started forward, but Marcus held out his arm, stopping her. "Don't move," he ordered, his gun pointed at me. "Put the weapon down, Miller. Now." My mind raced. Kowalski had just claimed Marcus was Richard's partner, the real power behind everything. But here he was with Chun and Sarah, apparently protecting them. "He's one of Richard's men," I said, nodding toward Kowalski. "They were waiting for us. They know about the safe house." Chun stepped forward, her own weapon now drawn. "Put the gun down, Frank. Then we can sort this out." I hesitated. Who could I trust? Kowalski could be lying to create confusion. Or Marcus could be the traitor, playing a deeper game. My eyes found Sarah's. She gave me the slightest nod, almost imperceptible. "Friend, there are moments in life when you have to trust your instincts." If you've been with me this far, hit that subscribe button to see how the final confrontation between good and evil plays out. Because what happened next changed everything. I slowly lowered the gun, placing it on the floor and kicking it toward Chun. "Check his ID," I said, pointing at Kowalski. "He's not FBI. He was going to kill me and then wait for you to bring Sarah." Chun knelt beside the wounded man, pulling his wallet from his jacket. She flipped it open, then looked up at Marcus with alarm. "It's fake. Good quality, but definitely counterfeit." Marcus kept his gun trained on Kowalski. "Who sent you?" he demanded. Kowalski remained silent, his eyes darting between Marcus and me. Something wasn't adding up. If Marcus was Richard's partner, why was he playing along with Chun? He said Richard has a partner. I told them. Someone with real power. Someone who's been pulling the strings all along. Sarah moved to my side, her hand finding mine. "I was trying to tell you at the hospital," she whispered. "Richard was laundering money for someone much bigger. Someone untouchable. We need to get out of here," Chun said urgently. "If they knew about this location, nowhere is safe." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling for backup and a medical team for this one." She nodded toward Kowalski. "No," Sarah said suddenly. "No calls. No backup. We don't know who we could trust." Marcus lowered his gun slightly. "What are you saying, Sarah?" "I'm saying Richard's network goes deeper than you know. Police, FBI, judges." Sarah's voice was steady but quiet. "That's why I came to Frank. He was the only person outside the system that I knew I could trust." Chun looked skeptical. "So what do we do? We can't just disappear." "Actually, we can," I said, an idea forming. "At least for a few hours. long enough to figure out who's really behind all this. I turned to Sarah. The butterfly box, the real one, not the decoy. You said it contained evidence about Richard's partner. Where is it? I hid it, Sarah replied. Somewhere Richard would never think to look. Marcus holstered his gun, his expression unreadable. We should secure the prisoner first, then talk about next steps. No, I said firmly, watching his reaction. First we get the evidence. Then we'll know who we can trust. A tense silence filled the cabin. Kowalski had stopped struggling, his eyes now fixed on Marcus with an expression I couldn't quite read. Expectation? Fear? Where is this evidence? Shin finally asked Sarah. At Holy Cross Cemetery, Sarah answered. I buried it in my mother's grave 6 months ago. It was the one place I knew Richard would never search. Marcus checked his watch. It's almost noon. The cemetery will be busy. Too public for Richard's men to try anything. He looked at Shun. We should go now, while we have daylight. What about him? Shun nodded toward Kowalski. Leave him cuffed here, Marcus suggested. We'll send someone back for him once we're safe. That didn't sit right with me. He's our only link to Richard's organization. If we leave him, his people will find him. Then what do you suggest? Marcus asked, an edge to his voice. He comes with us, I said. Wounded or not, he might be valuable. Marcus and Chin exchanged looks. Finally, Chin nodded. Fine. He rides with Marcus and me. Sarah goes with you in the second car. If anything happens, split up and head for the cemetery. We'll meet at the east entrance. We quickly bandaged Kowalski's shoulder, enough to keep him from bleeding out, but not enough to ease his pain. I wanted him uncomfortable, more likely to talk. Marcus and Shin led him to their car while Sarah and I took the second vehicle, an unmarked FBI sedan. As we drove away from the cabin, following Marcus and Shin, Sarah gripped my hand tightly. I'm not sure we should be telling them everything, she whispered. Not until we know who to trust. I know, I replied just as quietly. But we need their help to get to the cemetery. After that, I left the sentence unfinished. Sarah nodded, understanding. The real evidence isn't actually at the cemetery, she said, her voice barely audible above the car's engine. That was a misdirection. I needed to see how they'd react. My eyes widened. Smart. So where is it really? Remember our first apartment? The loose floorboard in the bedroom closet where we used to hide emergency cash. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It's still there. I checked 6 months ago. The new owners never found it. Our first apartment, a tiny one-bedroom in a neglected building on the east side. We'd been so happy there, despite the leaky faucets and temperamental heating. It had been torn down last year to make way for luxury condos. Sarah, I said slowly, that building doesn't exist anymore. The color drained from her face. What? No, that's impossible. I was there 6 months ago. I hid the evidence myself. They demolished it in January. It was all over the local news. Richard's company bought the block for redevelopment. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, the evidence, it's gone. I watched her face carefully. Either she was genuinely shocked, or she was an exceptional actress. When exactly did you hide this evidence? Last August, she said, distress clear in her voice. Richard was away on business. I had maybe 2 hours when I knew I wasn't being watched. August. The building had still been standing then. But if it was demolished in January, Richard must have found out somehow. The timing of the demolition can't be a coincidence. Sarah's eyes widened with realization. The bedroom camera, she whispered. He installed security cameras throughout the house after I accidentally found his private office. He must have seen me leave that day and followed me. So he knows about the evidence, I said grimly. And he made sure to destroy it. Not necessarily, Sarah said, her mind working quickly. I disguised what I was doing. I visited several places that day. My old workplace, the park where we used to have picnics, even my mother's grave. Richard wouldn't have known which place actually held the evidence. So he destroyed them all. I realized. The park was renovated last fall. Your old office building changed hands. And now the apartment building is gone too. Sarah leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes briefly. He's been one step ahead this whole time. Even from jail, he's orchestrating everything. I checked the rearview mirror. Marcus and Chen's car was still behind us, maintaining a constant distance. Were they really taking us to find evidence, or leading us into another trap? We need to lose them, I decided. At least until we can figure out who's really working for Richard. Sarah nodded. The next intersection. There's a shopping center with multiple exits. If we time it right with the light. I accelerated slightly, watching for the opportunity. The shopping center appeared ahead on the right, a sprawling complex with several entrances and exits. The traffic light ahead turned yellow. Perfect timing. I hit the gas, the car lurching forward through the intersection just as the light turned red. In the rearview mirror, I saw Marcus and Chin's car stop to the light, Marcus pounding the steering wheel in frustration. I swung hard into the shopping center, weaving through the rows of parked cars toward the exit on the far side. By the time the light changed and Marcus could follow, we'd be long gone. Where to now? I asked as we emerged onto a different street, heading away from our original route. Sarah thought for a moment. The storage unit. There might still be something that we missed, and it's the last place they'd expect us to return to. The storage facility was quiet when we arrived, the same as it had been the day before. Unit 327 was still unlocked from my previous visit. Inside, the mess remained, boxes overturned, contents scattered across the floor. Richard's men were thorough, Sarah said, surveying the chaos. But they didn't know what they were looking for. And we do. I asked. Sarah moved to the far corner, where an old steamer trunk sat beneath a tattered tarp. This was my grandmother's. Richard never saw it, because I kept it here after we got married. He thought everything important would be in the butterfly box. She opened the trunk, revealing old clothes, photo albums, and memorabilia. Carefully, she removed these items, placing them on the floor beside her. At the bottom of the trunk was a false panel, similar to the one in the butterfly box. Richard knew about the hidden compartment in the butterfly box, because I showed it to him once, Sarah explained. But he never knew about this one. She pressed a hidden catch, and the panel popped up. Beneath it was a small fireproof document box. Sarah lifted it out, her hands trembling slightly. This is it, she said, placing the box on a nearby table. Everything I couldn't put on the USB drive, or the voice recorder. Bank records, photos, names, dates. She looked at me, her eyes intense. Proof of who Richard's partner really is. The box was locked with a small key, which Sarah produced from a chain around her neck. I've kept this with me every day for the past year. Even in the hospital, it was the one thing I made sure they didn't take. She inserted the key and turned it, the lock clicking open. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, and a small digital memory card. Richard isn't just trafficking women, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper, even though we were alone. He's moving drugs, weapons, and laundering money for someone much bigger. Someone who used Richard's legitimate businesses as a front for an international criminal operation. She pulled out a photograph and handed it to me. It showed Richard at some kind of formal event, shaking hands with a distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit. I recognized him immediately, Judge Edward Harrington, the most respected federal judge in the state. Harrington, I said in disbelief. He's one of the most powerful men in the justice system. Sarah nodded grimly. He's the one who signs off on warrants, or denies them when they get too close to the operation. He's the one who makes evidence disappear, who makes sure the right people get appointed to the right positions. She pulled out more photos. Harrington with various police officials, FBI directors, even the mayor. His network is everywhere. That's why Richard was so confident he'd walk, I realized, even with all the evidence against him. Exactly. Harrington would never let it go to trial. The evidence would be ruled inadmissible. Witnesses would change their stories or disappear, and Richard would be released with an apology and a lawsuit against the department for false arrest. I spread the documents across the table, trying to make sense of it all. Bank statements showing millions flowing through shell companies. Shipping manifests with coded entries. Photos of Harrington meeting with known criminals in private locations. This is enough to bring down the entire operation, I said, awed by what Sarah had gathered. But how did you get all this? Carefully, patiently. A photo here, a document there. Richard kept records of everything as insurance against Harrington ever turning on him. Sarah's expression darkened. But when Richard realized I was gathering evidence, he tried to eliminate me. That's when I knew I had to act quickly. The sound of car doors slamming outside made us both freeze. They found us, Sarah whispered. I moved to the unit's door, peering through a small gap. Marcus and Chun were approaching, weapons drawn. Behind them, sitting in their car, was Kowalski, still handcuffed but conscious. How do they know where to find us? I muttered. Sarah's eyes widened. The car. It must have a tracker. We had seconds to decide what to do. We couldn't leave without being seen, and we couldn't hide in the small storage unit. The evidence, I said urgently. We need to secure it. Sarah quickly returned the most crucial documents to the fireproof box, along with a memory card. Here, she said, pressing the box and key into my hands. Whatever happens, this needs to reach the right people. I'm not leaving you, I protested. You might have to, she said firmly. One of us needs to make sure this evidence gets out. Before I could argue further, the storage unit door slid open. Marcus stood there, gun pointed at us, chin right behind him. That was a stupid move, Marcus said, his voice cold. Get up slowly. Both of you. Sarah and I raised our hands, the document box still clutched in mine. We know about Harrington, I said, watching Marcus's face for a reaction. We know he's the one behind everything. A flicker of something. Surprise? Concern? Crossed Marcus's features. I don't know what you're talking about. Now hand over whatever you're holding. Actually, Chin said suddenly, her gun now pointed at Marcus. I'd like to see what's in that box too. Marcus turned, shock evident on his face. What are you doing, Rebecca? My job, Chin replied evenly. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do. She nodded to us. Show me what you found. Keeping my movements slow, I placed the box on a nearby crate and opened it, revealing the documents inside. Evidence connecting Judge Harrington to Richard's operation. Financial records, photographs, everything needed to prove they've been working together for years. Chin's expression hardened as she quickly scanned the contents. This explains a lot. The cases that mysteriously fell apart, the warrants that were denied, the witnesses who changed their stories. She looked up at Marcus. Did you know about this? Marcus's gun hadn't wavered from us, but his eyes showed conflict. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Harrington isn't just some corrupt judge. He has connections everywhere. Federal agencies, international organizations. He can make people disappear with a phone call. So you didn't know, Chin said, disappointment heavy in her voice. How long, Marcus? How long have you been working for them? I never worked for them, Marcus snapped. I investigated them. For 3 years, I built a case against Harrington. And when I finally had enough to move, my partner disappeared. My evidence vanished. And Harrington called me personally to explain how easily he could do the same to my family. So that was it. Not corruption, but coercion. I saw the truth in Marcus's eyes. A good man forced to make impossible choices. Help us, Sarah urged him. With this evidence, we can bring down Harrington once and for all. Marcus shook his head. You don't understand. It's not just Harrington. He's protected by people you've never even heard of. People who make Richard Blackwood look like a small-time crook. Then we take it higher, Chin insisted. Justice Department, FBI headquarters, the media if necessary. The media, I repeated, an idea forming. That's it. Not just one outlet that could be controlled or silenced. All of them, at once. A public disclosure so big that no one could cover it up. Sarah caught on immediately. Richard's going to make his first court appearance today. The press will be there in force. It's the perfect opportunity. Chin nodded slowly. A press conference right outside the courthouse. With all this evidence, plus what we already have. It won't work, Marcus argued. Harrington will have security there. They'll stop us before we can say a word. Not if we have help, I said, looking at Chun. Not if we bring in people we know aren't connected to Harrington. Chin thought for a moment. I have contacts at the state police. They operate independently from the local jurisdictions. And I know a federal prosecutor in the next district who's been trying to nail Harrington for years. So we do this now, Sarah said firmly. Today, before Richard's arraignment. Marcus finally lowered his gun, his decision made. If we're doing this, we need to move fast. Harrington will know we've gone off the grid. He'll be preparing for every contingency. What about Kowalski? I asked, nodding toward the car outside where Richard's man sat watching us. We bring him too, Chin decided. He's a loose end Harrington would want tied up, which makes him valuable to us. We quickly gather the evidence, securing it in the fireproof box. As we prepare to leave, Sarah pulled me aside, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that took my breath away. Whatever happens next, she said softly, I want you to know something. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of what Richard turned out to be, but because you were the best part of me. You still are. I gently touched her face, remembering every line, every expression. We'll have time to talk about all of that after we finish this. The courthouse was packed when we arrived. News vans lined the street, reporters setting up for live broadcasts of Richard Blackwood's arraignment. Security was tight, police barricades, officers checking everyone entering the building. Chen had made her calls en route. State police officers met us 2 blocks away, providing an escort and additional security. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Mallory, reviewed our evidence in a nearby coffee shop, her expression growing darker with each document. This is explosive, she said finally. Harrington has been operating right under our noses for years. She looked up at us. You realize what this means? Once this goes public, none of you will ever be completely safe again. We're not safe now, Sarah pointed out. At least this way, there's a chance for justice. Mallory nodded, gathering the documents. I'll handle the legal side. You 4 focus on the press. Maximum exposure, minimum details. Let them know enough to break the story, but hold back the specifics for the investigation. We approached the courthouse steps as a unified group. Chun and Marcus in front, Sarah and me behind them, surrounded by state police officers. Kowalski had been taken to a secure facility, ready to turn state's evidence in exchange for protection. The reporters noticed us immediately, cameras swinging in our direction. Chin stepped up to the hastily arranged microphone stand. I have a brief statement regarding the case against Richard Blackwood. She began, her voice steady and authoritative. As she spoke, I scanned the crowd. Journalists scribbling notes, cameramen adjusting equipment, curious onlookers. And there, at the edge of the gathering, men in dark suits speaking urgently into their earpieces. Harrington's people, no doubt, trying to figure out what was happening. What Ms. Chun is trying to say, a new voice interrupted, is that there have been some unfortunate misunderstandings in the Blackwood case. Judge Harrington himself was approaching from the courthouse doors, his dignified bearing and confident smile projecting authority. Several police officers moved aside respectfully to let him through. Judge Harrington, Chun acknowledged coolly, we were just discussing evidence that has recently come to light. Harrington's smile didn't waver. Yes, I've heard about these allegations. Unfounded, of course. The desperate attempts of a troubled woman and her obsessive ex-husband to smear a respected businessman. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. The only desperate person here is you, Judge. Desperate to cover up years of corruption, trafficking, and money laundering. Harrington's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Blackwood, given your recent medical episodes, perhaps you should be resting rather than making slanderous accusations. They're not accusations, I said, moving to Sarah's side. They're facts. Facts that are currently being shared with every major news outlet in the country. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harrington's face. He glanced around, noticing the state police officers who weren't responding to his authority, the federal prosecutor standing to the side with a briefcase full of evidence. Whatever fabrications you've concocted, he began, but Chin cut him off. Save it for your own arraignment, Judge. Federal agents are currently executing search warrants at your home, office, and vacation properties. Your bank accounts are being frozen as we speak. Harrington's composure finally cracked. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed, his voice low enough that only those of us closest could hear. The people I work with don't forgive failure. They don't allow loose ends. Then you'd better start cooperating, Marcus told him, because right now, you're the biggest loose end of all. State police officers moved in, surrounding Harrington. A moment later, FBI agents appeared, led by a senior official who nodded to Mallory. Edward Harrington, the FBI official announced formally, you are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and a dozen other charges I'll enjoy reading to you downtown. As they led Harrington away, the crowd of reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Chun handled them expertly, providing just enough information to ensure the story would dominate the news cycle for weeks. Sarah slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. It's really over, she whispered. Almost, I replied, watching as Richard was led out a side door of the courthouse, his expression thunderous as he saw Harrington in custody. One more thing to do. Richard's eyes found us in the crowd. For a moment, all his masks dropped away, revealing the monster beneath the polished exterior. Then security ushered him into a waiting transport vehicle, and he was gone. In the days that followed, the full scope of Harrington and Richard's operation came to light. The trafficking network was shut down, victims rescued, and offered support. The money trail led to corrupt officials in a dozen cities, all now facing justice. Richard himself, seeing the mountain of evidence against him, and with no powerful friends left to help, agreed to a plea deal. Life in prison in exchange for information on international connections. Sarah and I were placed in witness protection temporarily, given new identities, and relocated to a small town on the other side of the country. Chun visited occasionally, bringing updates on the case, and, once, news that Denise had been found dead in her apartment. An apparent suicide, though no one really believed it. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on the porch of our new home watching the sunset, she turned to me with a question in her eyes. Do you ever regret it? Getting involved in all this? I considered the question, thinking about all we'd lost. Our homes, our identities, the lives we'd built. But then I looked at Sarah, at the second chance we'd been given. Not for a second, I told her honestly. Some things are worth risking everything for. She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. I miss this. Just being with you, watching the day end. We have plenty more sunsets ahead of us, I promised. And as the last light faded from the sky, I knew it was true. Our story wasn't ending. It was just beginning again. Friend, thank you for staying with me to the very end of this journey. If you believe that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for the truth, no matter the cost, then please tap subscribe and join our community. You won't want to miss the stories we share next. I've picked out another story just for you, and you should see it on the screen now. I hope to see you there.